Hello and welcome to the Global Church Project. I'm Graham Hill. Andrew Sloane is lecturer in Old Testament and Christian thought and Director of Postgraduate Studies at Morling College in Sydney, Australia. He studied medicine at the University of New South Wales and practiced briefly as a doctor before training for Baptist ministry at Morling College, from which he graduated with a Doctor of Theology in Philosophy and Old Testament Studies. Andrew was ordained as a Baptist minister in 1991 and ministered in Sydney and Newcastle before joining the faculty at Ridley Anglican College in Melbourne. Andrew joined the faculty of Morling College in 2002 and has published in Old Testament and hermeneutics, ethics and philosophy, and theology. His most recent book is Vulnerability in Care, Christian Reflections on the Philosophy of Medicine. What do you think medicine is, and what do you think medicine is for?
So I think medicine is primarily a community's expression of care, its solidarity with members of its community whose weakness, vulnerability and frailty has been exposed by something that they've come up against in their life, either some kind of infirmity or disease or illness, something that has disrupted their physical or psychological functioning. Medicine is a way of a community, if you like, embracing those people rather than abandoning them in their need. That's basically what it is. And in that sense, medicine clearly has fuzzy boundaries. It overlaps with a whole bunch of other things that communities would do in order to help those who are vulnerable in their midst. Nonetheless, I think that's at the very heart of it. And as Christians, I think that's something we ought to be passionately concerned about. And that way of thinking about it, I think, lines up very clearly with the fundamental features of the Christian story.
How does thinking about medicine help us do theology?
Well, I think medicine raises questions that otherwise theologians might forget. So when we're thinking, for instance, about a fundamental category like shalom, which I think is a kind of governing idea. It helps us see what human existence is meant to look like. Thinking about medicine helps us understand particular aspects of the disruption of shalom. And if we're doing theology, if we're thinking carefully and critically as Christians from the perspective of the scriptures, from the perspective of the gospel of Jesus, from the perspective of the tradition, then thinking about those things that go wrong in human flourishing matters theologically. Mustn't neglect it. But also might challenge some of our theological categories. We can, I think, be a little too glib, for instance, in our understanding of the character of flourishing. So one of the things that Mess is particularly clear about is the way that disability forces us to think differently theologically, because we tend to think, if you like, of how can I put this, of able-bodied normativity, which is okay as far as it goes, but then we don't think, what does it look like for someone who's born blind to flourish? What does it look like for someone who has a spinal injury and is now paraplegic or quadriplegic? What does it look like for them to flourish? And what patterns of community do we need to put in place to ensure that they can flourish as much as they can? Clearly that flourishing isn't going to be expressed in standard bodily form, but nonetheless, not only can they flourish, but they can contribute to the flourishing of our communities. That, it seems, is really important. Or when you think about people who are dying. Now, the theological tradition has lots and lots and lots of really interesting resources on the art of dying well, which really is a matter of shaping our lives with a sharp awareness of our own mortality. But that's something I think that our culture and our churches have veiled from view. Medicine, with its engagement with people who are dying, who are facing the inevitability of their finitude, the inevitability of the decay of their bodies, which is something that we will all face, force us to reflect theologically again about death and dying, and both the shadows and lights that casts on what it means to live well.
Does it also help us think a bit more about the nature of community and the role of community?
Absolutely. If medicine is an expression of a properly formed community's care for its members, then clearly we need to do a bit more thinking about what kinds of care ought we to provide to the vulnerable in our midst. Because medicine is just one of those forms of care. And if it were the only form that our care for the vulnerable took, then ours would be deeply impoverished communities, rich as medicine might be. Because, again, for vulnerable people, things like economic systems, social structures, even transport infrastructure, those things can be absolutely crucial to whether they can live well or not. It's not that thinking about medicine gives us answers to those questions, but thinking theologically about medicine prompts us to ask a range of questions that we might otherwise forget.
Is there anything else that you want to share with us on this topic today?
Oh, not without giving you the whole book, I suppose. The key thing, I think, is one thing I think theology has neglected at times is its responsibility to be a servant of the church. Or if it's not forgotten that, it's thought of the church far too narrowly. So it's thought of the church as gathered, or perhaps thought of the church as it's engaged in what can be clearly seen as a missional activity. Theology has tended not to think well, hard and long about what it is for the church scattered to engage Christianly in the various fields in which people find themselves. There's not been a lot of good reflection on what does it mean to be a Christian doctor. Some of the standard answers I find offensively reductionist, in fact. And these are even answers that good and faithful Christian doctors have come up with. Things like, well, our job is to evangelise our patients and our colleagues when we can. I guess to contribute to people and their physical needs, and to make money to support ministry. That strikes me as offensively impoverished. Because if our story is the story of a God who made the world and who is bringing it to its fulfilment and fullness through the midst of brokenness and sin, then it seems to me that medicine has a really important role to play, and Christians have a really important role to play in thinking about what it is. That perhaps is not just that we're being kind to people, but perhaps that engaging in medicine well is one of the signs and foretastes of the kingdom that we are called to manifest. That thinking about the institutional frameworks in which that operates, the kinds of values that they embody, that's an expression of the kingdom of God, that we can think about how might that glorious goal towards which we are heading be reflected even in the patterns of social arrangements. But there's a lot more I could say, but I think that'll probably do for now.
Andrew Sloane, thank you for joining us and Thinking Theologically.
Thank you very much, Graham.
The Global Church Project is located at www.theglobalchurchproject.com. On our website you'll find a wide range of interviews and resources for colleges, universities and churches. I look forward to your company next time. From me, goodbye.